When palace aides were summoned to an unscheduled, late-night strategy meeting behind locked doors, no one expected the two most formidable women in the royal family to square off. But what unfolded that night would set fire to decades of unspoken rules and send shockwaves through the entire House of Windsor. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The corridors of Buckingham were unusually quiet, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. It wasn't protocol for Camilla, the Queen Consort, to call such a gathering without the king present. Yet there she was, seated at the far end of a polished mahogany table, flanked by a select circle of succession advisors. Her tone was calm, composed, even regal, but her agenda carried a quiet urgency. The purpose of the midnight assembly? To discuss succession safeguards, a phrase that cloaked a much more controversial aim, reinforcing Camilla's voice in future regency decisions should Charles ever be incapacitated or pass unexpectedly. But before the first proposal could even be presented, the heavy oak doors creaked open once more. Princess Anne entered with clipped steps and unwavering focus, her presence instantly altering the room's energy. She hadn't been invited, but she had been informed. Her allies among palace staff had tipped her off, unwilling to see royal tradition rewritten behind closed doors. The frost between her and Camilla was immediate, but it wasn't new. For years the two had danced around each other, cold civility, veiled barbs, but tonight the gloves were off. Camilla barely acknowledged Anne as she resumed her pitch, laying out her proposed revisions. She spoke of stability, of continuity, using careful language that masked deeper ambition. But Anne had heard enough. With a voice as sharp as a blade, she interrupted, demanding clarity on Camilla's true intentions. "This is not about protection," she reportedly said. "This is about positioning. You want influence where none was intended." The air thickened as the two women stood opposite each other, not just as royals, but as symbols of two very different futures. The tension was electric. Senior aides and advisors exchanged anxious glances but dared not intervene. One attendee would later describe the moment as paralysis, with seasoned staff frozen in silence as two royal titans clashed in real time. The temperature dropped further when Anne invoked the Queen Mother's legacy, reminding Camilla of the sacred line she was now attempting to cross. She protected the throne, Anne declared, not her title. Camilla, her voice unwavering but colder now, pushed back, asserting her right to be heard as the king's wife, the nation's queen. She made it clear that her involvement in succession planning was no longer optional, it was necessary. And yet, in that moment, it wasn't just about duty or bloodline. It was about pride. It was about legacy. It was about who would shape the royal house in the uncertain years ahead. But as dawn broke over Buckingham, whispers of the confrontation had already escaped the palace gates, and the royal panic was only just beginning. For years, Queen Camilla played the long game, waiting, smiling, enduring. But behind the scenes, a silent network of loyal courtiers and old allies had been working to secure a future that extended far beyond her ceremonial title, while public appearances painted her as a dutiful consort, graceful, obedient, supportive. The reality behind palace walls was far more intricate. In the shadows of coronation fanfare and pageantry, Camilla had begun weaving a delicate web of influence, carefully placing confidants in strategic positions. From advisory roles to ceremonial appointments, her quiet power was expanding stealthily, steadily. In the months following the coronation, she convened a discreet task force comprised not of politicians, but of trusted figures from Charles's earlier circles, tasked with reviewing outdated succession language buried in royal charters. Their goal, to modernize and stabilize the protocols. But Camilla's definition of stability had a very particular slant. Draft proposals began circulating, never officially filed, but always present in royal corridors. These amendments did more than clarify regency transitions. They placed Camilla in a consultative position during any future succession uncertainty. She was painted as a neutral overseer, a term designed to soothe concern but loaded with authority. Her allies argued that the monarchy needed a maternal guardian figure should Charles become unfit to reign. Critics, however, saw a power maneuver thinly veiled behind tradition, The phrase informal influence became a euphemism whispered among palace aides who feared directly challenging her ascension in court dynamics. Leaked memos found their way into the hands of select journalists, never published, but widely discussed. The most damning implication: that Camilla was eyeing a seat at the Regency Council itself. Traditionally reserved for blood royals, the council oversees the monarchy in times of incapacitation or minority. For Camilla to suggest involvement even indirectly was unprecedented, yet some insiders claimed she wasn't acting alone. Charles, they alleged, had quietly endorsed her involvement, signing certain documents during periods of fatigue and stress, choosing trust over confrontation. The rumblings grew louder. Whispers of Queen Regent began circulating in international media circles, fueled by palace silence and Camilla's refusal to publicly deny her ambitions. Some in the family took this as confirmation, others viewed it as a distortion. But one truth was unavoidable: Camilla was no longer content to be a supporting figure. She was reshaping her role not by decree, but by erosion. One line of tradition at a time, she was redrawing the monarchy's rules. But if Camilla's rise was quiet and calculated, Anne's retaliation would be anything but. The Princess Royal has never backed down from duty, but this time, it's personal. As whispers of protocol revisions reach her ears, Anne makes a solemn vow to those closest to her: Camilla will not rewrite this monarchy while I still stand. From that moment, the conversation shifted from quiet unease to determined resistance. Anne moved swiftly, calling together a private council of trusted allies, including Princess Alexandra, not to gossip, but to plan. She spoke with a clarity that stunned the room. Tradition was under threat, and if they failed to act, everything the late Queen had guarded could be reshaped in silence. There was anger in her voice, yes, but beneath it, grief. Because to Anne, the monarchy wasn't an institution to manipulate, it was a promise. And promises, once broken, never fully mend. She argued that Camilla's proposals were not about modernization at all. They were, in Anne's words, a power grab dressed in protocol, wrapped in language that sounded dignified but carried an entirely different purpose. To strengthen her case, Anne unveiled something she had held onto for months, a sealed document written by Queen Elizabeth herself. It did not name names, it did not accuse, but it hinted at roles carefully considered, responsibilities balanced, and future oversight intended for those born into the crown, not married into it. The revelation wasn't theatrical. It was devastating. Around the table, silence fell, not from fear, but from the weight of what could be lost. From there, Anne demanded something radical: the reactivation of clauses tied to the older Regency Acts. Clauses many had forgotten, meant to ensure that non-blood consorts would never shape the line of succession, regardless of circumstances. Her reasoning was simple: if Camilla was building influence through paperwork, then Anne would counter with law. Not shouting, not scandal, law. Her strategy became deliberate and relentless. She began reaching beyond immediate family, speaking quietly with royal elders, constitutional scholars, and historians who remembered how fragile monarchies become when ambition moves faster than restraint. Those conversations didn't just gather opinions, they gathered allies. People who had remained neutral suddenly understood that neutrality was no longer an option. They saw the danger in blurred lines, in whispered authority, in documents written behind closed doors and justified later as necessity. Anne wasn't asking them to attack Camilla. She was asking them to protect the institution they had sworn to serve. And the more she spoke, the clearer it became. This was not sister-in-law tension. This was a battle for the soul of succession itself. Yet even as Anne strengthened her legal arguments and fortified her alliances, the story wasn't slowing. It was tightening. Because while she was building her case brick by brick, another force was moving just as deliberately, refusing to yield, refusing to step back, refusing to be defined by limits she no longer accepted. As Anne sharpened her legal and historical arsenal, Camilla wasn't retreating, she was escalating. Buried in the royal archives was a single document, a little-known clause penned during Queen Elizabeth II's reign that might completely derail Camilla's ambitions. But discovering it was one thing. Making it public could tear the monarchy in two. It began with a hushed request issued by Princess Anne to the head archivist, one of the few individuals she trusted completely. The instruction was specific: locate a file known internally as Protocol Note 442, a legal briefing drafted during the final decade of Queen Elizabeth's reign. Most within the palace had either forgotten about it or assumed it had been quietly discarded, but Anne had not. She remembered the late Queen's cautious nature, her deep concern over future power dynamics, and most importantly, her unwavering belief that the throne must never be swayed by influence born outside the bloodline. The archivists worked in secrecy, and after days of sorting through red-sealed envelopes and handwritten notations, the document surfaced. Its contents were explosive. Protocol Note 442 explicitly detailed the late Queen's instruction that consorts, no matter how respected or positioned, must remain excluded from any involvement in succession discussions or regency decisions. The clause was not emotional, it was clinical, deliberate, precise. It made clear that only those in the direct line, or appointed by Parliament under specific circumstances, could be entrusted with such influence. The implication was devastating. If binding, the document didn't just oppose Camilla's aspirations, it completely invalidated her proposed amendments. Word of the document's rediscovery traveled faster than anyone anticipated. Before Anne could even prepare a formal presentation, Camilla's legal advisors were already at work, challenging the document's legitimacy. They questioned the timing, the context, even the authorship, suggesting it was merely advisory, a ceremonial footnote in a sea of royal tradition. But Anne knew better. This wasn't a suggestion. This was a safeguard. And now that safeguard was at the center of a storm neither woman could control. The palace fell into a quiet frenzy. Advisors scrambled to interpret centuries of precedents. Legal scholars debated whether a monarch's private instruction carried force beyond their reign. Some insisted the document had weight, especially considering Queen Elizabeth's stature. Others argued that without public ratification, it was merely personal opinion. In the midst of this debate stood King Charles, torn between his wife and his sister. According to several insiders, he pleaded with Anne in private, not to abandon her beliefs, but to hold back, to consider the consequences, to think of the crown, of unity, of how easily one revelation could fracture what his mother spent a lifetime holding together. But Anne, firm in her conviction, made no such promise, because for her, silence was no longer loyalty, it was complicity. And the monarchy was to survive with its soul intact, then uncomfortable truths would have to be faced, no matter the personal toll. Yet Anne wasn't the only one holding powerful papers. Camilla was ready to play her own hidden card. The press erupted when a private palace memo surfaced, allegedly signed by King Charles, endorsing Camilla's involvement in succession oversight. But it was the final paragraph that sent the royal court into absolute panic. The document appeared online late in the evening, anonymously sent to 3 media outlets and labeled strictly confidential. It bore the unmistakable signature of Charles III and detailed proposed advisory roles for Queen Camilla in the event of any constitutional uncertainty. Though phrased cautiously, one section stood out in stark contrast to royal precedent. It suggested Camilla should be consulted without restriction in all future regency scenarios, placing her in the same breath as senior blood royals, a move that ignited a firestorm of public outrage. Headlines exploded across tabloids and broadsheets alike, accusing the monarchy of orchestrating a quiet coup under the guise of administrative reform. Within hours, public trust plummeted. Online forums labelled Camilla the Power Queen, while critics called the move a betrayal of the late Queen Elizabeth's legacy. Inside the palace, the walls closed in fast. Anne's allies saw the leak not as a mistake, but a tactic, a deliberate maneuver by Camilla's camp to manipulate public perception and create pressure from the outside in. They claimed it was designed to normalize her involvement, to plant the idea in the national psyche before official mechanisms could object. Anne remained composed in public, but those close to her revealed she was livid. This wasn't just about ambition anymore. It was about manipulation, optics, and influence far beyond courtrooms and chambers. And then, just as the backlash reached fever pitch, Camilla made a bold move. She attended a high-profile charity gala, smiling, poised, and unbothered. When questioned by reporters about the leak, she dismissed it with a light laugh and a vague, "Some papers are best read in silence." The calculated non-denial only fanned the flames. Was she confirming the memo's authenticity, or simply reveling in the confusion? Either way, the message was clear: Camilla wasn't hiding. She was owning it. Inside the royal council, shock turned to uncertainty. For the first time, factions began to form. Those who once sat quietly in neutral chairs were now forced to choose. Some felt Charles had made a grievous error under pressure from Camilla. Others insisted his intentions were strategic, an attempt to avoid deeper unrest should his health falter. The question loomed large: was the king a silent conspirator or an unwilling participant? The ambiguity fractured once unified voices, and for the first time since Elizabeth's reign, the council appeared divided not by ideology but by loyalty. Behind closed doors, Anne sharpened her rhetoric. She knew this leak would force her hand, and fast. Every day the memo stayed unaddressed. Camilla's image as an official guide to the monarchy's future solidified. The Queen Consort was no longer playing behind the curtain. She was at center stage, armed with paper, influence, and undeniable nerve. But amid the political warfare, an unexpected voice would enter the fray and change everything. Behind closed palace doors, William, Prince of Wales, confronts both Camilla and Anne in a rare tri-council meeting. His words, spoken with firm grief and conviction, would echo across every corridor of Windsor. The air was heavy as William entered the chamber, not as an heir preparing for the crown, but as a son weary of the family tearing itself apart. The scandal had spread far beyond palace walls, making headlines, memes, and murmurs in Parliament. For a family whose strength once lay in its silence, the current state was intolerable. William, usually reserved in matters of internal conflict, broke form. He addressed both women with a voice laced in frustration and sorrow. He confessed his dismay not only at the leak or the backlash, but at the very idea that the monarchy's future had become the subject of public mockery and private sabotage. It wasn't just about duty anymore, it was about survival. He turned to Anne first, pleading, not commanding, that she consider the cost of prolonged division. He asked her, not as a sister or a royal, but as the monarch's most loyal defender, to weigh unity against principle. But he didn't side with Camilla. Not entirely. There was restraint in his support, a hesitation that echoed throughout the room. When it came to succession, he remained adamant lineage must guide the way, not loyalty. He asked for accountability, not allegiance. He warned of spiraling consequences, not just for their generation, but for George and those to follow. If the public sees confusion in the line, he warned, they'll lose faith in the crown itself. Then, in a closed session with Camilla, his tone shifted. Gone was the diplomatic air. In his place stood a man willing to draw boundaries. He told her firmly, unmistakably, that the power struggle must end, not tomorrow, today. She tried to interrupt, to challenge his understanding, to insist that she was merely stepping up when others had stepped back. But he cut through her words with a chilling calm. This power struggle ends today. Camilla, stunned, accused him of choosing sides, of betraying the balance the king had tried to maintain. William didn't reply to the accusation. But Anne, seated in silence, didn't need words to read the tension. This wasn't negotiation. This was a reckoning. What shook the room most wasn't Camilla's reaction, nor Anne's quiet authority. It was William's deeper warning, the veiled message that George's future was being shaped not by his actions, but by the infighting above him. If we fracture this now, William said, we hand our children a shattered crown. He wasn't just calling for peace, he was demanding clarity. He proposed a formal inquiry into succession protocols, consort authority, and every grey area that had been manipulated. No more sealed memos, no more shadow councils. The crown, he declared, needed daylight. But as William tries to broker peace, the king himself emerges shaken, exhausted, and prepared to make the hardest decision of his reign. a rare moment of vulnerability behind gilded palace doors. King Charles III reportedly breaks down in a private council chamber, uttering the words no one expected. "This isn't the monarchy I promised to protect." It was meant to be a resolution meeting, one final attempt to salvage unity before the royal institution splintered beyond repair. King Charles, frailer than many remembered, summoned every senior royal to Windsor. No press, no aides, no pre-written statements. Just blood, legacy, and truth. As he stood before them, his voice wavered not with authority, but with grief. He confessed that the chaos of recent months had drained him, not just physically, but spiritually. He admitted through tired eyes that he had signed certain documents not with strategy in mind, but with weariness in his heart. He had hoped to avoid confrontation. He had tried to keep the peace by appeasing both sides, but instead, he had opened the floodgates to something far more dangerous: doubt. With tears building, Charles turned to Anne and Camilla, no longer the king but a brother, a husband, and a man caught between two forces he once believed could coexist. He begged them plainly, earnestly, to find common ground, to remember that the monarchy was never meant to be shaped by ambition, but by sacrifice. The room held its breath as he admitted his greatest fear, not of scandal or shame, but of dying and leaving behind a throne no one trusted. His words cut through centuries of royal formality. "This isn't the monarchy I promised to protect," he said, as silence swallowed the chamber. He proposed what no one expected, a final reckoning. Each woman, Anne and Camilla, would submit her vision to the Royal Advisory Council in writing, no spin, no positioning, just truth. And then, for the first time in modern memory, a formal vote would be held. Not in Parliament, not in the press, within the palace itself, among those who had earned their voices through duty, not dynasty. Charles would oversee the process but abstain from casting a vote. "I've influenced too much already," he confessed. It was a gesture of rare humility, one that left many around the table visibly shaken. The weight of the moment was unmistakable. This was no longer just a disagreement between two royal women. It had escalated into a constitutional crisis, tethered to the very soul of the crown. Anne agreed with a quiet nod and a clenched jaw. Camilla, tight-lipped, offered no verbal response, but her acceptance was implied. A 7-day deadline was set. In 1 week's time, the future of royal succession would no longer be written in shadows but decided in full view of history. But before that decisive vote could take place, another shock would erupt, this time from the very next generation. In a surprising turn, young Princess Charlotte, barely a teenager, delivers a pre-written statement during a royal charity broadcast. Her words aren't just eloquent, they are electric, instantly reframing the battle for the monarchy's soul. No one expected it. The broadcast had been arranged weeks earlier, meant to highlight royal involvement in children's welfare, not to comment on constitutional tension. But as the cameras rolled and dignitaries watched, Charlotte stepped forward with a composed poise well beyond her years. Then she began to read. The words weren't inflammatory or partisan, they were something deeper. She spoke of peace not as surrender, but as strength. She spoke of wisdom not in age, but in knowing when to listen. And most powerfully, she spoke of dignity not as a costume of royalty, but as the foundation on which the monarchy should stand. "The crown," she said, "is not made by power, but by purpose. And that purpose must be unity." In minutes, the mood across the nation shifted. Social media ignited. News networks broke into regular programming. Within hours, #FutureQueen surged across platforms, a rallying cry not born from lineage but from belief. The people saw in Charlotte not a child caught in family conflict, but a voice untouched by rivalry, clear, honest, and piercing. Even those skeptical of monarchy found themselves listening. Here was someone young enough to be unburdened by history, but wise enough to remind everyone of what mattered. Behind palace walls, the reaction was immediate and divided. William and Catherine were visibly shaken, moved not just as parents, but as protectors of a future their daughter now embodied. Anne, upon hearing the address, offered no comment, but a faint nod and a whispered "well done" betrayed a depth of admiration words could never match. But Camilla, according to insider accounts, reacted with icy silence, not anger, not shock, just silence, as if the gravity of the moment had settled in too quickly to process, because no memo, no council vote, no carefully constructed plan could counter the raw, unexpected power of a child's clarity. Commentators across the country described it as a reset moment, not legally binding, not officially influential, but symbolically unstoppable. The Royal Advisory Council, sensing the mood of the nation, made a dramatic pivot. The vote scheduled for the following week was postponed, not cancelled, but delayed, pending wider discourse and internal reassessment. Suddenly, what had been a private civil war behind velvet curtains had become a national conversation, one the palace could no longer control. The Queen Consort's influence now had a counterbalance, not through defiance or legislation, but through legacy reimagined in a younger voice. And in that voice people heard the echo of a monarch long gone and the early stirrings of one not yet crowned. And just when the palace began to breathe again, the final revelation would detonate everything that came before. It was hidden in a sealed velvet pouch, meant only to be opened in times of great crisis. But when Queen Elizabeth's private farewell letter was unearthed, its words were devastatingly clear. And neither Camilla nor Anne were named. The discovery came not from a council decision or public outcry, but from a quiet moment of duty. A senior aide combing through Windsor's private vault to update archival records stumbled across a pouch marked only with the Queen's personal insignia and the initials ER. The pouch had been logged years earlier, but flagged to remain sealed unless circumstances became, in the late Queen's own words, desperate for clarity. With the monarchy teetering between division and collapse, the seal was broken. Inside, written in Queen Elizabeth's unmistakable script, was a letter addressed not to the reigning monarch, not to a specific heir, but to the institution itself. What the letter revealed stunned every member of the Royal Advisory Council. In it, the Queen laid out her personal reflections on the future of the monarchy, whom it should trust, how it should endure, and what must never be allowed to influence its direction. With resolute finality, she stated that the throne's integrity depended on the lineage it served, not the spouses it gained. She wrote, "The children and their children's children are the crown's living promise. Let them carry it forward, without shadow or interference." There was no mention of Anne's counsel, no space carved for Camilla's oversight. The monarch, known for diplomacy in life, had chosen bold clarity in death. Anne, asked to read the letter aloud before the final advisory gathering, did so with a trembling voice. The weight of her mother's words was too much to bear without breaking. By the final line, she was in tears not of triumph but of heartbreak. Everything she had fought to protect was now affirmed, but at a cost that neither side had fully prepared for. Camilla, seated nearby, reportedly stood in silence, bowed her head, and walked out of the chamber without uttering a word. There was no dramatic retort, no protest. Just a quiet exit that echoed louder than any confrontation. In that moment, King Charles stood and addressed the room. No longer caught between sister and wife, he now had an answer he couldn't ignore. With the letter in hand, he reaffirmed Prince George's future as absolute and unchallenged. He asked the council to dissolve all succession-related debates immediately, and instructed that the Queen's letter be placed in the royal archives unredacted, permanent and available for future generations to understand. What followed was not applause. It was silence of respect, of closure, of reckoning. Outside the palace, the public responded, not with outrage, but with reflection. The nation mourned the turbulence, but recognized the moment for what it was. The crown returning to its roots, guided by the ghost of a monarch who had once held it together through war, scandal, and change. History would remember the battle, but it would also remember its resolution not forged through dominance, but through legacy. The battle may be over, but the scars of succession will shape the monarchy's soul for generations to come. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.